Hi, my name's David Witwer, and I'm the president of the Pennsylvania Historical Association. And I want to welcome you to what's a new venture for the Pennsylvania Historical Association, which I'll refer to in the future here as PHA, because we love to use initials. And the new venture is going to be a recorded Zoom webinar, which we're going to place on our PHA YouTube channel, and then we're going to link it to our PHA Facebook page. And so people will find it when they're looking for it. And sometimes the way it works in the internet, they're going to find it when they're not looking for it, which is even better. Our goal is to use this new tool, which is the Zoom webinar that we've all, at least the faculty, have become painfully familiar with in the last year or so, but to use it as a tool to strengthen the outreach of the PHA, to use it to reach both our own members, but also hopefully the general public as well, and to talk about the activities of our organization and the affiliated and allied organizations that we work with, and to use it to promote, in general, the public interest in terms of Mid-Atlantic and Pennsylvania history. So today's webinar is going to focus on one of the key activities of the Pennsylvania Historical Association, which is our annual meeting. For this year, it's scheduled for October 14th to 16th, and we're currently accepting proposals for it online through our website. And these can be proposals from individuals or from groups. And so today we're going to be hearing from Professor Janet Lindman, who is the program chair for this year's annual meeting. But she was also last year's chair of the program committee, which is actually a pretty phenomenal thing. That doesn't happen. I myself was the program chair for the meeting before that, and I can tell you it's a lot of work, and so it doesn't tend to happen that someone does it twice in a row. It's actually kind of well, it's a very distinctive thing for it to happen, and we're quite lucky that Professor Lindman is generous enough to have done it. So she's going to talk about the annual meeting, and she's going to offer important insights onto the goals for this meeting and how we came to develop the particular focus for the meeting that exists. But she's also going to talk about the distinctive format that we've developed to adapt to the pandemic situation. It will be a virtual annual meeting, and she's going to talk about the format that presentations will take in that annual meeting. And then we're going to be hearing from two of the brightest scholars in our organization this year, Debek and Julie Holcomb. Both of them presented at last year's annual meeting, and they're going to talk about both their own research, which is quite fascinating, but they're also going to share their experiences in adapting that research and that presentation to the distinctive format of this virtual annual meeting. So with that, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Professor Lindman, and I'll fade off in the background and occasionally just sip coffee from my handy mug here. All right, go ahead.
Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. I'm glad you could join us and learn more about the PHA. As David said, I was the program chair for 2020, and I will be the program chair for 2021, which is unusual, but part of it's because of the pandemic, and we're trying to have some continuity. Usually we have at least one person from the former year on the next year for that, but in this unusual situation, we thought it best that I continue. I also have the same program chair members, which is great, and they've all been very helpful to set the last one up as the one that's coming up in October of this year. So I'll say a little bit about the 2020. I only agreed to be program chair partly because 2020 was the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment of the Constitution, and as a women's historian, I thought it was extremely important that PHA highlight it. Like all annual meetings we put on, we usually have a theme of some sort, but we also accept panels from a wide range of scholars, archivists, public historians, public school teachers, etc., on Pennsylvania history as well as Mid-Atlantic history. But because of the pandemic, we decided to do something different. So instead of having the 2.5-day conference we usually have, we broke it down to 1 day, and we decided to just focus on suffrage and reform. And in that way, we could really streamline our focus and really highlight the important anniversary that we were celebrating. So Julie and Dana were two of the papers that really spoke to that theme in terms of how we organize the conference. In terms of the organization itself, with the help of the former PHA president, Rachel Batch, and Jake Wolf, who is our tech person, we worked out kind of the bugs of how to do this. And we really wanted to make it engaging. We didn't want to have a bunch of talking heads droning on. So we told the presenters, everyone will have a PowerPoint, use images, make it lively, engaging, and short. Each panel was only 45 minutes when they're usually an hour and a half. So that was really different. And that really helped. The other thing that helped is we had everyone record ahead of time, except for the 3 live events we had. And I think that really helped as well because it kept it streamlined. And the only tech problems we had during the whole day were the two of the 3 live events. So I think that was very good planning on our part. And at least for the people who participated, they really enjoyed that. The other thing we did is gave specific instructions to both the chairs and the presenters so they could keep on track. And again, keep the event moving and make it lively, because in this context, in this kind of format, we were afraid, we don't want people droning on and boring people. And we were trying to widen our audience through this medium. So I think that was a good choice. So if we want to turn to the panelists now, it's a good idea, David. So Julie, would you like to go first?
Okay, sure. So I'm Julie Holcomb. I'm based at Baylor University in Waco, Texas. My area is Quaker history, particularly 19th century Quaker history. And I'm working on a biography of Philadelphia Quaker reformer George W. Taylor. He was involved in free produce, anti-slavery, temperance, peace, and the women's rights movement. And so what I did for the PHA for 2020 was I wanted to really focus on the women in his network, because so much of what little scholarship there is on Taylor really focuses on him and not the women who were absolutely vital to the success of his endeavors. So that was the subject of my presentation, and then trying to figure out how to take that and adapt it to this new format. And what I did, I approached this presentation very differently than any other conference presentation that I've done. Rather than writing a traditional academic paper that you read that's 15 to 20 minutes long, instead approaching it like that and then taking this long paper and trying to squeeze it down to 5 to 7 minutes. I threw out that idea altogether. I didn't write a paper, a traditional paper for this presentation. Instead, I started out really focusing on 3 things. What was the argument that I wanted to make? What evidence did I want to use? And what visuals did I have that would support that was part of that evidence? So I decided to, in my presentation, I decided to focus on 4 women. Those were my 4 key points. I had visuals, photographs of 2 of the 4 women. So I had to get a little creative in coming up with relevant visuals for the other 2 women. And ultimately I went with a letter written by one and a newspaper article for the other one. And then I laid this out in PowerPoint, so giving each woman a slide. I had an a title slide, and then I also had a slide that was a map of their network. I used an online mapping tool to map out the locations of the 4 women. I kept my text on my slides. I kept it to a bare minimum. Basically, I had the women's names and their life dates, and that was it. I wanted to keep my slides as visual as possible, really focusing on the images that I had selected for each woman, and keeping that creating really visually attractive slides for the audience, so that they're not having to look at it's like Janet was saying about, the talking heads, avoiding that and really keeping the focus on the visuals that I had selected. PowerPoint has some great tools for helping to lay out a presentation like this. So when I sat down with PowerPoint, once I had my visuals and had figured out which slides I would use, I laid those out in a blank presentation in PowerPoint, and then I used the design ideas tool, which if you haven't worked with that, highly recommend that, because you can lay out you can put in your text, the images that you want to use, and then click on the design ideas tool, and it will give you a dozen or more suggestions on how you can lay that out in a really attractive way. I drafted a script to go along with my slides. And as I was drafting that script, I set a goal of about 1 minute per woman that I talked about. So 4 minutes there, and then 2 to 3 minutes for my introduction and my conclusion. I had a lot of fun putting this together. It was challenging, but I had a lot of fun developing this presentation, because it gave me a way to think about my research material. It was a very different way of thinking about the material that I was presenting. I also had a lot of fun with it because sometimes I angst a lot over my writing. I worry about my writing and getting, the transitions just right. And in this case, I didn't have to really worry about that as much, because it was so condensed and really forced me to think about the essentials. So, my advice to someone preparing a presentation in this format would be to set aside your ideas of what a traditional academic presentation should be, and really think more visually about your topic.
Great. Dana, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Dana Debek. I'm a doctoral student in media and communications at Temple University. My research focuses on media history and public memory. And in terms of looking at the suffrage movement, I'm really seeing how it's used in media and used by organizations as a backdrop for talking about contemporary feminist social action. So for the PHA, similar to Julie, I took larger research and distilled it down, not so much into a paper, but into the presentation. And I was looking at media coverage, specifically newspaper coverage of the 50th anniversary of the passage of the suffrage amendment in 1970, and compared the coverage that the New York Times had of that particular event with the Los Angeles Times, and sort of how this bi-coastal conversation was happening, and how these two different cities and two different newspapers were really looking at that event, and how those themes of suffrage memory, how we remember the suffrage movement within other instances of feminist social action happened and was contextualized. So in terms of preparation, a lot of my preparation was very similar to Julie, thinking about my presentation and less about sort of the paper that would go with the presentation. I wasn't sitting there reading a paper, which was nice. It felt more conversational. And the thing I really liked about having a pre-recorded presentation was that I felt as though I wasn't as focused that day on my presentation. So normally, even leading up to the days, although the presentation is done, I'm still practicing it, I'm still thinking about it, I'm still anticipating what I want to say. Where at this point, I had already recorded the presentation a few weeks prior. So a lot of my preparation day before, week before, was anticipating questions, watching my presentation back, seeing what gaps were in there, other things I might want to talk about, what types of questions I would anticipate getting, and really being able to prepare that and have a much deeper conversation during the question and answer period than I normally would at a conference. Which was very much appreciated. And I echo Julie, it was a lot of fun.
Thank you both for those explanations. And I really like the way in which you sort of walk through the process of devising a very different sort of presentation than the standard one, which is, I've been doing these presentations since well, perhaps since before some of you were born, but it's so standard now. And so I think for scholars who are thinking about this different format, it's really good. I like this notion of not just trying to sort of pigeonhole that old style, right? That 15 to 20 page conference paper into the new format, but instead just start from the ground up and think about the benefits of this style of presenting. one of the things I was going to ask about, and Dana, you kind of set it up in what you were talking about, is you guys gave a very good description of creating this presentation. But I'm curious if you could just say a few words about, after your presentation, if you could sort of address the interaction between you and the other panelists, or between you and the people who were there for that presentation. What was the nature of that, and how did that compare to sort of, say, the standard conference format?
I really enjoyed questions coming through the chat feature, because I don't know about you all, but a lot of times when I present at a conference, someone asks a question and halfway through answering it, you have no idea what they asked. You just,
right.
you kind of go off the cuff and you're like, wait, what was your question again? So being able to sort of have that reminder on the right side of the screen, like, this is what I'm addressing, this is the question they're asking, especially when it's a multi-part question.
Yeah, exactly.
I found really, really valuable.
Yeah, and you can see that record of questions too on the chat. And so you can say, now this kind of relates to this previous question and this other question. I like that coherency to it. That's a really good point. Julie, how about you?
I would echo Dana's comments that was because that typically, I have this, like, I start off to answer the question. I have this brilliant response in mind. And then halfway through, it's like, wait a minute, where where was I headed with that at? So having the chat feature on the, the side of the screen, and being able to look at those questions, and also being able to look at previous questions, that really helped. I really liked that.
And so in both your cases, there was like a vibrant post-presentation discussion as well?
Yes.
Yes.
And I would echo what Dana said earlier, that, having pre-recorded the presentation, I could really think about, in the days leading up to the conference, I could think about what and anticipate what kinds of questions might come up. So I actually felt more prepared going in than I usually do, and less stressed.
Right. That's nice.
Yeah, because often at conferences, if you have the wrong computer, or they don't have the right setup at the hotel, lots of things can happen that delay presentations, and that's stressful in itself. And then you kind of forget, oh, I have to also present.
Cards on the table, a wordy guy like myself, I'm often like 10 minutes before the start of the session trying to figure out how to cut it down to actually meet the time requirement. And I don't always do it. And then so an added element of the stress, which I always see in conferences as well, is people are going over the time, and therefore they're reducing it while they actually talk. And the result is really just a lot of stress, and maybe not always the perfect presentation that people would have hoped for.
Yeah, and to that point, having the presentations be a very specific time limit, and being able to watch it back and say, oh wait, I went a minute over, where can I cut, was also very helpful.
Yeah, and being able to, and you're also able to, with that pre-recorded, if you have little ticks that ums and ahs and ooh, if you, those sorts of things, you can edit those out in the PowerPoint.
Yeah, if you mess up a date or something.
Yeah,
exactly right. So this is very good. I don't want to force this, but I did want to make sure that I got back to Janet, because I thought she did a very good explanation of the particular presentation format that emerged, and the call for papers, the topic for the 2020 conference. But one of the things that's distinctive, right, is each annual meeting has a call for papers that focuses on a particular topic, and so the devising of that topic, which is generally sort of it's the goal for the annual meeting, and it's also sort of the umbrella, but it's not a restrictive fence. It doesn't say if you're not right within that topic, you can't propose a paper. But the thinking behind that is always very, it's really one of the key roles for the program committee and the program chair. So Janet, I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about the distinctive call for papers, the topic for which the 2021 meeting is devoted.
Okay, so for this year in October, the theme is Justice and Rights in the Mid-Atlantic. And given recent events in the last year or so with Black Lives Matter, the Me Too movement, and of course, what happened at the Capitol and the transition with the presidential election, we really wanted to focus on those issues to respond to what's happening now in terms of American history, but also it could apply to other time periods, obviously. So we wanted to leave it wide open in that sense, but we also wanted to encourage not just historians, but scholars in other fields such as law and justice or sociology, even public health, you know, in terms of what's been happening in our country in the last couple of years as a way, again, to reach a wider audience, because we're always looking for ways to reach out to other people who have an interest in the Mid-Atlantic and Pennsylvania history at many levels, not just those who are academics teaching at colleges and universities. And the deadline is March 15th. Everything is online. So if you just go to the PHA website, it's Pennsylvania Historical Association. You'll see a link for the annual meeting. Go to the annual meeting. You'll see the 2021. Click on that and you can submit your paper or your panel online. So it's really quite easy to do. And that's one good thing about computers and modernizing in that sense. It makes it a lot easier for the program committee to actually see the submissions and then try to build some panels with the papers or present the panels as a group.
Good, very good. Yeah, and I love that notion too, right? It's sort of, we think of the Pennsylvania Historical Association in the name as this idea that it's for historians and then people in Pennsylvania, but the goal is really much broader, right? So first of all, just in terms of geographic focus, we really are in the name somewhere that I can't pull up right now. We have the words Mid-Atlantic, which is very much a part of what happens at the annual meetings, that Pennsylvania is within this larger region. And so we like to see presentations drawn from that wider region that cover that wider region. And then the other notion is, right, so what we like is a wide range of people from various academic, but even non-academic perspectives that can come in. And so historians in academia, which is me, that's for sure, and others, but also, we have grad students. Dana, I believe that's you, right? And we also have a poster session feature for undergrads that can present as well. And then a wide range of different academic specializations. So Dana, for instance, you do media studies, right?
Yes.
And we have people from political science and people from journalism history, and really, ideally, as Janet said, any number of range of academic perspectives. And always a key feature is public history too. And so we tend to get very good representation in these annual meetings from people in different areas of public history as well.
And the other advantage of having the conference being virtual is particularly for people who work at like small archives or county historical societies who often can afford to go to a state meeting, regional meeting. This is one way they can participate. And we had a great participation at the meeting last fall.
Really did, yeah. All right. Can anyone think of anything else they want to add?
I just wanted to say, as somebody coming from outside the history field and from history departments, that I did find the PHA to be an incredibly welcoming space, and really appreciated being able to participate in the annual meeting, but also being able to engage with historians and other scholars. So I will say, if anyone is outside of the history field and concerned about applying, that it was a very welcoming space.
Yeah, good. Thanks for saying that. I mean,
yeah,
it may challenge people's believability, but actually the way I ended up in the Pennsylvania Historical Association is I presented at an annual meeting long time ago, maybe 10 or 12 or 15 years ago. And at that point, I'd already been presenting at academic conferences for quite a while. And I just totally enjoyed the experience. Like it was a very good crowd that was there, very hospitable, very friendly, and very constructive. And it really completely drew me to the PHA as an association. I liked the annual meeting. It demonstrated to me the kind of openness and welcoming quality of the association. And now here I am, nominally driving the car for a couple of years. All right. I'm going to thank all of you and unless there's anything else, I'm going to end the meeting, which I think is always a key thing to do for Zoom. It's great to be able to reach people, but one of the things I think we've all discovered is that less is more for these venues as well, which is part of what all of you were talking about for the for that shortened notion of presentation. So let's not violate that as well on this super cool new Zoom webinar.
Thanks,
With all
David.
of that, thank all of
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, whoever's tuning in. All right,
Yeah.
bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.